Lloyd, we're heading into the rocks. We're going down. My wife, Mary Jane, cried with a panicked voice. Wake up, she said. Well, I roused myself out of a deep sleep on a rented houseboat and realized that we were in real danger. A few days before, we had rented a houseboat in Toms River, New Jersey. And with audacity, as inexperienced sailors, sailed that houseboat up the coast of New Jersey into the New York harbor and up the inland waterway all the way to Sorel, Quebec. And along the way, we tried to stay in marinas where we could latch ourselves onto something solid, but every so often would have to anchor in one of the many anchorages noted on the charts. One night, the St. Lawrence Seaway was as calm as a mere. We pulled into a little anchorage. It was calm. I put out the anchor. Now, the scope of an anchor is the ratio between the distance from the bow of a ship down to the bottom underneath the water. And the ratio that I figured on a calm night like that would be adequate was 5 feet per ratio. It should have been much more. What I hadn't calculated was that during the night along the St. Lawrence River, the Seaway, gigantic tankers would move, sending swells 8 to 10 feet high. Well, we had a lovely dinner on the stern of our little houseboat, crawled into our sleeping bags to have a nice, quiet sleep for the night. And then I was awakened by my wife, and she was standing in her nightgown on the bow of the ship with the wind flapping her nightie, crying out with the loose anchor line in her hand. Lloyd, get up and save us. Well, I finally got up and realized the plight that we were in, got the motor started, put it into reverse, and yes, as you can see, we're still here. That was years ago, but I'll never forget it. One of the most important parts of sailing is knowing how to anchor. And one of the most vital aspects of living is knowing what your anchor is and where to put it. My question is, do you have an anchor on board? What kind of an anchor is it? You know, there are several kinds of anchors as you study it in the whole history and background of sailing. For example, there's a regular small anchor that you use when everything is calm. Then there's quite a different kind of anchor that's called a lunch anchor that you just throw out when you want to take a little time in easy circumstances. But most craft carry a storm anchor. I want to talk about a storm anchor. I want to talk about what that anchor is. I want to talk about an anchorage that's really reliable. And I want to talk about the line, the road between your craft, your life, and the anchor. The authors of the epistle, which is called Hebrews, describes a quality of hope that has in it two metaphors that seem almost contradictory, or certainly tempt us to go down two different roads. I want to go down both and hold them together. The author of Hebrews says, this hope, indicating a very special quality of hope, is like an anchor of our soul, safe and secure and steadfast. The Greek word really means firm, which enters the presence behind the veil. Now suddenly we've changed to the language of the temple or the tabernacle. And we have to combine nautical terms with the terms of what goes on in the inner sanctuary of the tabernacle. But I want to do both. I want to hold them together. because there is a message here for us that's absolutely reliable and demands that we think and make a new commitment. First of all, what or who is our anchor? Our anchor is Jesus Christ. The author of Hebrews makes it very clear that the anchor he's talking about is Christ himself, Jesus Christ. He's talking about that anchor being firm, safe, and secure. It's an anchor that won't snap, an anchor that's strong, an anchor that's vital. But he talks about it as the anchor of the soul. That is, it brings our lives to the place of stability where we can't drift away. Now, what is the anchorage? And that's where we get into this strange and unusual but challenging metaphor that the anchor enters the presence behind the veil. Now, hang in there with me for just a moment, and I think you will find that your attention has been rewarded. How can you get an anchor behind a veil? And what veil? The author of Hebrews is talking about the construction of the tabernacle in the wilderness, and subsequently Solomon's temple, Zerubbabel's temple, and Herod's temple. Now, after the outer courts, the court of the women and the court of the men, there is the holy place. And in the holy place is an altar for the sacrifice of the lamb. And then there's a table for the showbread, 12 loaves for the 12 tribes of Israel. And then there is a large lantern, a great candlestick. Now, beyond that, there's the table for the incense. And then a gigantic, thick, heavy veil. Once a year, on the great day of atonement, the high priest made a sacrifice upon the altar and carried the blood behind the veil into what was called the Holy of Holies. And what was there? Listen. In the Holy of Holies, where God met his people, was the Ark of the Covenant. And inside the Ark of the Covenant were the tablets of stone on which were placed the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments. And over the Ark was something that was called, in Luther's translation, the mercy seat. The Greek word for it really means propitiation, the covering of mercy. The Hebrew word simply means covering. So the covering over the ark, which contained the tablets of the 10 Commandments, was called a mercy seat. Gnadenstuhl, as Luther called it, picked up later by Tyndale, and has found its way into our English translations of the Scripture. What it really means is that there are two dimensions inside the veil: the absolute demand of God and the absolute succor of God. Absolute demand and absolute love. And we can't have one without the other. And so when Jesus Christ becomes our anchor, he anchors us in the anchorage in the very heart of God. And once that happens, nothing can disturb it. Now, that veil that separated the holy place from the Holy of Holies was rent by an earthquake. When? When Jesus died on the cross. It was rent apart, so that now not just the high priest could go into the Holy of Holies and observe the power and awe and wonder the justice, the mercy of God. But now that way is made open to all of us. So the anchor of your life has been rooted and grounded right in the essential heart of God's justice and His mercy. Now, what does that mean? Let Jesus Christ take you by the hand. Let Him rip open any portion of the veil that religion or human effort has created, any of the fibers of tapestry of self-justification that's been created. Let Him rip it open in the name of His blood and lead you right in to the Holy of Holies, to the Father. And what do you have there? His demand, the Decalogue. Let me tell you, on this day in 1988, those 10 commandments are still in power. God has not changed. We have changed. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. I want to tell you, I have other gods before God. I want to succeed. I want power. I want to lead. I want to leave behind me a memory of accomplishment. I want to be a great father. I want to be known for love and forgiveness. I have idols, and so do you. What are they? What tends to stand before you and the living God as your false God? What part of your portfolio in these tragic times is flapping in the wind, getting at the very vitals of your being? What part of that mortgage for your house has become God to you? Do you ever walk through your living room and touch the beautiful fibers of the new furniture and say, "It's mine, it's mine, it's mine"? And you sit in the warm leather beauty of your car and you say, I did it. It's mine. God, you're not co-pilot. Get out of the car. What is it for you? The holiness of God calls for a holy people, and that means that we belong first and foremost and only to Him. Everything else is secondary, but move down them. He calls us to love Him and not covet and not envy, to not lust. We're living in a time when our desire to be accepting has led into advocacy. In seeking to be understanding of people involved in the intertwining pull of adultery, we have drifted to the place where finally the church is now standing for compliance with the distortion of marriage. It doesn't make any difference. Sleep where you want to, with whom you want to, wherever you want to. And in an effort to reach out to the homosexual world, to give love and forgiveness and acceptance, we've moved from acceptance to advocacy, to the place now in America the church stands declaring that there's a third sex, and it's not true. Neither biblically, physiologically, nor psychologically. And we stand before the holiness of God. We have to admit it. Now, I would be the first to say that this church and this ministry will be accepting and forgiving and caring for people who face infraction of and failures in their sexuality. But that doesn't mean that we're going to drift to the place that acceptance means advocacy. You see, we've talked about the anchor, Jesus Christ, who by His own blood has made us right with the Father. Now, The question is our boat attached to the anchor line that goes to that anchor? You know, the term bitter end is one that we use in everyday parlance, but it really is a nautical term. The bitter end is the end of the anchor rod or rope or chain that is to be attached, first of all, through the chock, onto the fastener, down into the hull, to a permanent part of the craft. And we're living in a time when we're watching the bitter end slip up from the hull of the ship. We see it snaking across the deck of the ship. It's going through the chocks. We see it come down the side, and we now feel the craft of our life drifting away. Yes, we have orthodoxy. We believe all the right things. We say all the right words. The anchor is in the rock. But the bitter end is not connected to our life. We're living in a time of American history when Time magazine could say that morality and righteousness ended with the death of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King. Both of them are my heroes. Don't misunderstand me. But I want to tell you that the condition of our culture is because the church has not stood before the justice and righteousness of God and experienced His love. What I'm trying to say is this: there is a quality of hope that comes when we face the justice of God and see what He demands of us and say, I can't do it. I can't put you first. I can't live a celibate life. I can't be faithful in my family. I do steal and lie and cheat. I'm a part of the sickness of my culture. But God, have mercy on me. And the hope is that He has and He will. And it's for you. Neither do I condemn you. Go in peace. That's the anchor. And I want to tell you, it'll never get loose.